Welcome to the Woodlands Area Chamber of Commerce Young Professional Network podcast, a show where we discuss topics related to business, lifestyle, politics, and other challenges that young professionals are facing. We want our Millennials and Gen Z to strengthen today for your impact on tomorrow.
Welcome everyone to the second episode of the Young Professional Network podcast, and it is a special election episode. Being the next generation of business women and businessmen, we are excited to produce this podcast to provide Millennials, Gen Z, and the next generation with business insights, tips, and to discuss topics that are trending with these generations. So join us every other Thursday for new episodes, fun episodes, serious episodes. All of them. We're going to get down to it. And David's going to introduce our new guests.
Yeah, so today's topic is Millennial and Gen Z take on politics. So we'd like to welcome today on the show, we have Margot McZeal, Director of Government Affairs at the Woodlands Area Chamber of Commerce. Welcome.
Hey, how's everyone doing?
We also have Iker Pimienta, Chairman of the Montgomery County Hispanic Chamber and Wealth Advisor at Carson Wealth.
Yes, happy to be here.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us. So today's going to be more of discussion based. So we're going to go ahead and get started off with our first discussion point, which is Millennials and Gen Z are gearing up to have the most voting bloc in the electorate. So according to AmericanProgress.org, in 2024, the two younger generations are expected to equal the older ones as a share of actual voters on election day. And by 2028, Millennials and Gen Z will dwarf the older generations as a share of both eligible and actual voters. That will be true not only nationally, but in all the crucial battleground states, according to previously unreleased projections provided by States of Change. How do we feel about that? We've got the power.
We do.
Yeah.
And it seems like it's becoming more and more near than what a lot of individuals thought that it would happen. 2024 is going to be a good year to see how things are going to go, especially during a presidential election time, and see how those younger voters are going to take over.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems like more and more as politicians are trying to cater to a younger audience, whether with what they say or some of their policies, and trying to include it. I think there's still a gap there. But like Margaret said, 2024, even from the last presidential election, some of the talking points were different. And coming from some older politicians, it's interesting to see what it's going to look like when they start changing and how they have to change their approach and start recognizing the impact that our generations will have.
Okay, so I like that you said that. You hit 2 points that I was thinking. You were talking about the gap, which I think is very important.
Yeah.
Let's start there. Let's just start there.
Yeah.
How do we bridge that gap? Because 2024 is what age? What are they? That's 2000, right? Because they're the eight. What year are we in, y'all? 21. Okay.
It's 2021. Yeah.
What year is it?
Yeah.
So that's what 2000 something, whatever. They're about to be able to vote, right?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
How are we bridging that to meet them if they don't know? So we just came off a big presidential election, so we're going into a new one, right? Soon. And how are we going to bridge that? How we get the younger generation to get it, to get the importance? Is there an answer?
I think that's a good question that I'm still trying to figure out, but it's all depending on issues that are important to them.
Okay.
I know what happened previously before the presidential elections of 2020, where we had social unrest. Right. Social issues were being a forefront. And many of those Gen Z millennials, those are key issues to them.
Right.
So they wanted to make sure their voices were heard in more ways than one going out to the polls. And that was one of their stance that they could do.
Do we see that as a new target for electorals? Is that a target for the younger generation, you think? Because I think it is very true. Gen Z and millennials, social justice and social issues is a very big topic, whichever side it is. But do you think that's the new target moving forward to get younger voters?
I think social issues are something people resonate with right away. And I think that's a lot more powerful message, or can be more so than talking about an economic plan,
right,
or attacking someone for unemployment rates or market performance, because you can argue about those all day.
Right.
But social issues reach, they hit home, they're personal to typically everyone in some way or another. And I think that's what they're seeing got our generation's attention to really want to come out and vote, at least in the last election when they had record turnout numbers on both sides. When that was really at the forefront, as you said, I think that definitely had an impact on how many people came out to vote.
And just like we're seeing right now, it's all about motivation. What motivates them? And, the Woodlands area, we can speak upon that in our local elections. Local elections are the start of everything, the buildup. And getting those individuals, those young individuals aware that it starts here, like you need to start voting. And we have a really important election that's coming up for us November 2nd on incorporation in the Woodlands area. And looking at the stats on early voting, we do not have a lot of young individuals voting on this issue. So that concerns me.
Right.
Because it's like, what motivates them? What gets them out there and going to these polls? Is it because it's not hitting them close to home yet? Is it more of, I work here, I work in the area, but I don't live in the area? So it's kind of hard to still put my finger on what motivates us. What gets us out?
I think you made a good comment of it. It doesn't hit close to home yet. I think, unfortunately, that's the case for a lot of things, right? You don't think it'll happen to you, and then it does, and it's almost a shock, right? And fortunately, in the Woodlands, we have a great quality of life and good resources and transportation's great, but that may not always be the case, right? And we don't want it to have to experience that negatively until we want to make a change about it, right? So I think that's a great comment that you made. But things like that locally, that where I have a lifestyle here in the Woodlands, economic development's great. Those kinds of things where that may be a different draw for me to vote here locally than what would bring me to a national election, right?
Right.
I think that was a good point, though. Some people maybe don't resonate with it because they don't see it day to day, or maybe they're used to what they have and don't know what's at risk to change and how powerful elections can be.
Exactly.
I think another thing is I think what keeps a lot of younger people from the polls is the fact that I feel like we're more informed about politics, and we're more authentic when it comes to politics. And I mean, you just look and you're like, whoa, nothing changes. Like nothing changes. Like it's like being at Thanksgiving dinner and watching your grandparents argue. Like you kind of just want to leave the room, right? Or your parents. Why is you're being involved in this? Like I'm gonna go play video games, or I'm gonna go watch Netflix. Like I'm gonna just remove myself from this situation. And I think that's what we do on a political landscape. Because you turn on the TV, nightly news, or anything that has to do with politics, you watch any of these judicial hearings, and you're like, it's like watching grandma and grandpa have a fight. Like the same fight they've been having for 30 years. And you're like, why would I even want to go anywhere near that? Yeah. So I think for me, the issues are definitely important. But I think we also need to start looking at candidates as well. So I think providing an avenue for younger candidates to be involved in politics will then bring people to the polls more often. So, because if you're seeing a reflection of yourself inside the system, then you're going to want to be more involved in the system.
I think much like you said, I think it's about being relatable. I think the generation coming now, we want to see ourselves, whatever that is. We want to see ourselves, and that kind of goes into the diversity portion, whether it's gender, age, race, whatever it is. Yeah. You want to see yourself in that area. And if you don't, I think you're right. Our generation is very looking forward. Like, y'all been fighting over the same thing for 50 years. Like, what? Yeah. What's the point? Yeah. Like, what is the... Okay, so I want to bring something back up. How... Do you think it's some of the politics is about not being informed, or is it, I hate to use that phrase, but do you think that we don't understand? So we talk about incorporation, and I know I've heard it over and over again, but I do have peers that are like, what does that even mean for me? What is that, like, what does it mean to be incorporated? Do you think that information is a problem, or is it unrelatable?
I think it's unrelatable. Okay. I think the information, the resource is there, and I think the communications that they're having and displaying that, it's the gap, it's the disconnect there. You have to break it down to us, like in layman terms. you know, you have to give us a scenario of why this is important to us as young professionals, as young families, coming in, you know, to this world, into this environment that we live in. You know, just let us know.
Well, and there's so much information, like when it comes to incorporation,
Yes.
it's like information overload.
It's information
almost.
overload.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're
Right.
seeing graphics everywhere, or even the township has their
signs,
website. Like you have all these Zoom meetings you could watch if you really wanted to take all the time. But it's like our generation is like, can you just tweet about it? Like, can you just give tell me about incorporation in a tweet? I'll probably see it on my feed.
Yeah.
I'll be like, okay,
Give
got
us
it.
the 5 facts.
Yeah,
I was about to say, don't
What
make
are you
it
doing
too
120
long.
characters?
Yes.
Right.
No.
So
Yeah.
I think that's really true.
Yeah,
I
it is
think,
true.
I think that's true locally and nationally, though. You talk about these
Yeah.
bills that get discussed and $1 trillion level nationally, and then these local elections where, how do we get people to turn out? Well, okay, the resources are there. It's easier today than it's ever been to look up something online and see the pros and cons or what the discussion's about.
Yeah.
It's just that gap, though. Maybe it's people aren't relating to it, or they don't see how it impacts them, and so it loses their interest.
Yeah. It has to be that tug. Like, you know, every story, every situation has to make me feel like, okay, well, this could affect me in this way.
Right.
So I think that's where the disconnect is.
I think David hit on this in a little bit. How do we change things if government doesn't change? But what does that look like moving forward? Are we repeating or?
We are repeating because we have the same individuals in office where they're getting elected over and over again, but their mind is not changing with the world.
Okay.
You know, different circumstances come up, life changes, you know, politics change, and I feel like they're in the same old mind frame of that old way that politics is, and that's not going to work anymore. You have a more, as we talked about, more radical group that's coming in, Gen Z. They are being a bigger voice than even millennials at this time on what they believe. They're being very transparent on that. And they're going the extra mile that sometimes we wouldn't go.
Yeah, I think it's funny because in our industry and in the financial industry, like elder abuse is a big thing. So like you have to have an elder abuse policy. Like you need to have a trusted contact for your clients in case they start to show signs of mental degradation,
Right.
or they start to show patterns of behavior that are not beneficial to them. And I was thinking about this in relation to politics the other day, and I'm like, how ironic that like when it comes to our industry that's highly regulated,
Right.
we have to worry about elder abuse, but then you look at the makeup of the Senate, for instance, the Senate, over 60% of the Senate is over 60 years old. And I'm like, our country is being run by people who we would have to be watching for to make sure that they're not losing mental capacity.
Yeah.
That is absolutely terrifying. Like the fact that most of the Senate is between age 50 and 80, and less than, there's nobody in the Senate under the age of 40.
Wow.
And the House of Representatives, it's less than 10% are between 20 and 40 years old. Like we are not represented on a national level inside of our government. So it doesn't matter. Even if we showed up to the polls right now, it wouldn't matter on issues because they're not even discussing issues that matter to us right now. And I think for me, it's I've said this before, but it's not even a red and blue thing anymore. For me, it's not a Republican Democrat. Like personally, I don't think those two parties even know who they are anymore. But it's an old versus young thing now, and like I'm pushing, we need a young people's party. Like we need a party that represents the interest of our generation.
And I think you nailed it.
Yeah.
You know, it is not about a party, a Democrat or a Republican, because honestly, those are starting to fade out.
Right.
And it is becoming a young and old. And the numbers that we have, and you know, you just discussed, I'm interested to see how the younger generation is going to start taking that stance and running for certain positions and being elected, and becoming more aware of those issues that are important to them and bringing them to the forefront. You know, they say by 2028 we will be the highest voting
Right.
block. So I'm very interested to see how that's going to play out.
I don't know. I don't know. So we say that in 10 years, but will we be voting for us?
You saying representatives
Yeah.
in our generation?
Like, will we?
I know I'm ready for fresh. I'm ready for.
I think the country is. I think, looking at what Dave was just mentioning, I mean, even I remember the recent presidential election, it got to a finger pointing match of, okay, who could stand on their feet the longest, right? Trump can't walk down a ramp and Biden trips going up the stairs. It's a lose-lose, right? Yeah. That's not what we care about.
Right.
That's not what we want to hear. That's not what we want to see. So yeah, I'm ready for change. I know people are. It's just someone to relate to, someone that can, again, has the credentials and know what they're talking about, but can be realistic too. Like resonate with the younger generation that's shaping the rest of the country. And get out of those old ways.
Yeah.
Not even talking about term limits for everyone else, because I believe there should be. I don't think there should be a career politician that's in there for 40 years.
Exactly.
Right? But
I got stats on that too.
Yeah. But just freshness, yeah. And I think there's good candidates out there that are on the younger side.
I think so too.
They make points and they get, maybe they don't have the public draw as of yet, but that's who we want to see. Those people end up being represented and representing us. I mean that's what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah. So why do you? I have like a thought. I always thought about it, but Obama had the most highest rate in young voters to come out and vote for him. What is it that we're missing now from that time when he was running? What actually got them out there to vote? Because he did it. He did it for one part of his election run. So I'm just kind of interested. How did it die off? What are we doing wrong? How are we not encouraging and motivating? What information are we not sharing to get them excited about politics and get them excited about what's to come? And even encouraging those young individuals to go out and run.
I think you hit I think Obama was a first step of change. Whatever the change was, whether you agreed with it or disagreed with it, I think it was a step towards change. Mm-hmm. And I think many people loved it, many people hated it.
Right.
But I think hating it kind of took over and we took 10 more steps back. Because then we came right back to young versus old instead of a sense of some kind of change.
Got it.
Like I feel like we took a step towards change of something different, whether people loved it or not. And I think it ended up not being taken over well. And now we're back to young versus old instead of anything outside of the normal.
Right.
That's what I think. I don't know. Because that's a very true statement.
Yeah.
And how do we get back there?
Yeah.
I think I don't know the answer to that either. I think thinking back on Obama, it was the end of an 8-year term on the Republicans, so it was 2 new candidates. He was by far the more, Romney was the businessman and had the business experience and had the economic background, and Obama was the relatable one, right? He was a face of change, and he resonated with the ideas that young people wanted to hear and were passionate about. I think Cameron just said that after Obama's 8 years, it went, we lost that. Hillary and Trump didn't have that. They didn't have that draw. I would like, in 30,000 foot view in simple terms, I'd like to believe that was a part of it, but I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah. I do want to throw this out there. Just we've mentioned diversity slightly, but I want to make sure this gets in there. That the diversity in Congress, it's really interesting right now, is according to Fiscal Notes, even before starting its session, the current Congress, the 117th Congress, had reached an important milestone by being the most diverse in U.S. history. So for government affair professionals, this is more than just an interesting inflection point in congressional history. So it's been interesting if you look at the data and you look at both gender and then also race is trending the right direction. And how, if you look from 40 years ago, how low certain classes were represented and how we are shifting more towards getting to where Congress looks more like the actual population of the United States. We've reached that place on a racial side. On the gender side, unfortunately, women are still highly unrepresented in Congress, even though they make up 50.5% of the population. So that's, I think we also need to be looking at that as well, not just the age, but also how do we get more women involved and elected in politics. So, I mean, an ideal world for me, young women would be like perfect. Because I mean, come on, we all know men like to be up in the front, but women actually get things done.
Well, I was about to say we have to start that in the workplace.
Right, exactly.
Let's talk about it on a serious note. We have to start in the workplace. That is just another trickle down of why our generation and the ones behind us are very important. Because I think you're right, and not just because I'm a woman, but like I think you're right. I think we're just as important, just as smart, sometimes smarter. And we get things done. Yeah. Even, let's say, just as much or even more than men. And a different thought process sometimes, too. The difference between men and women are sometimes just a thought process. And I think that makes a big point as well.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree. I think it's only a matter of time until women do have a greater representation. We saw with Hillary as a presidential candidate. Not that political views aside, I don't want a woman to be elected president for the sake of having a woman president, right? The credentials have to be there, and she earned that spot. And just like Kamala being VP now, right? That's a major shift. You start seeing some other, more vocal and popular figures in Congress, whether it's AOC, whether it's some other members of the squad, or like a political figure I know is popular, Candace Owen, like has very strong opinions, and whether you agree or not, she has a voice and people respond to it.
Listen,
they listen.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a welcome change. I think they're earning the respect they deserve, and I'm hopefully you see more of that moving forward. Again, I think a big part of it is the age thing as well. There's other women like Janet Yellen. It's like I don't. Yeah, again, I know. Not to get into, but there's a balance there. Again, there's a balance there of not just having gender representation, but they can do the job and they've earned to be there. I think we'll see more of that. I'm not. That description did not apply.
Don't you love politics at work? It's great.
Yeah.
I think what's really exciting about the idea of bringing in a young people's party or focusing on age as a something that binds us together is that it's not about the issues then that we're deciding on why we want to be a collective group. So right now it's really easy to divide yourself red and blue because it's like there are fundamental issues in those parties that are never going to change. Right. So like Republicans are always going to be anti-abortion, like Democrats are always going to be pro-choice. Like those things are going to happen, and there is no middle ground there. So like those are hard like beliefs, moral beliefs, and so trying to build a party around moral beliefs, you're going to constantly be fighting what's different about you, or why that person is wrong. Where if the thing that's bringing us together is age, then we have a collective group that can go, okay, now how do we make the world a better place as this group? And we have already seen, as we talked about earlier, like with the social issues, is that we're more open to just being open to ideas in general, and not being locked down, but also realizing that at the end of the day, finding a solution is more important than being right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's a great point.
Yeah.
No, I think that's great.
You hit it.
I wish the older generation was that open and could get it like we do. Because then the way that things are right now would be a lot better. It wouldn't be such a division in who we are. It wouldn't be so much on the party affiliation, more on what's right. What can we do right in solving those problems? So I don't know. How did we get there?
Yeah, I think you made a good comment though. It's so personal now. And we spoke this a little bit earlier, just side talk, but people don't like talking about politics too often because you don't know how someone else will respond, and people take it personally now, and they may not agree with your political views, so now they're not going to want to communicate with you on any scale. It's just so divisive now,
right? Or even in the business world, you have to be careful about what you say politically or what you post online politically, because you might ruin a relationship that you want to do business with, or a potential relationship for business. So I'm constantly thinking about that and being like, oh my gosh, like I know what I truly believe, but then also it's like, what can I actually make public? Because now all of a sudden it's like, now you can no longer see me. You're only going to see my stance on this one particular topic. And now that's who I am to you.
Yeah.
And also being careful on what political party you are affiliating yourself with based on what you grew up with. I think that's very important as we get older to do your own research.
Absolutely.
Because sometimes you hear things and you're just like, wait, that doesn't even apply to you on a normal day. So how do you even, how?
Yeah.
How do you even believe that? That has nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
And I think doing your own research, and that's how we get away from the parties in general, by doing your own research and realizing, is it a moral thing? Are we making things better? Are we arguing to be right? Are we being productive?
Right.
Like, are we even being productive? Picking a side, is it being productive? I think that's also what we learned last year in the election. At this point, are we being productive?
Yeah.
Or are we fighting each other?
Yeah. Well, and I also think that you mentioned earlier about term limits. I think term limits is incredibly important. And obviously, it can't happen with the current people who are in there because they don't want to lose power. And so why would they ever vote themselves out of power? But without term limits, like, we're never going to have fresh ideas. We're never going to have those new people. It's going to be so difficult to come in. So we're just going to keep regurgitating the same ideas over and over and over again. And also with the idea of term limits, then it's like most politicians right now, especially at the national level, as soon as you enter, as soon as you get that seat, all of your energy and effort goes to retaining that seat, continuing to keep that seat. You spend more time actually trying to bring in money for your next election campaign than you actually do governing, which is also a waste of money, a waste of resources. It's extremely detrimental to our society. Whereas if you knew you came in, this is your only term, you're not going out for re-election. You can put all of your effort, all of your time, all your resources into actually advocating for your constituents, which is what you actually should be doing. And the last thing I want to say real quick on age is if you look back and you go and you look at the ages of our founding fathers, it's so ironic because most of them were in their 20s, 30s. Like Alexander Hamilton in 1776 was 21 years old. Like some of his close friends, they're like 18, 19, 20s. Like they're young people, and that's the only reason the actual revolution happened. Like, could you imagine if our current Congress was the original Congress? Like, we would still be British right now because there's no way. They don't have the energy, they don't have the desire, they don't have the drive. They'd be all fighting over who's going to be in charge after we beat the British, and we would lose. And it's like you need that young, that sort of idealistic energy to actually make something. And look what we made. We made America. Like, I mean, you think back then, it's like George Washington was 44 years old. Like that was an older person. So, and you definitely had some of the older people. Benjamin Franklin, I think, was 69 or 70 at that point. Like, so I'm not saying let's get rid of all the old people. That's not what I'm saying. But like, they're definitely there. We need their mentorship, and we definitely need their historical knowledge. But when you lean too far that direction, things become stale. And government begins to look more like a nursing home than an actual political arena.
Zach?
Yeah, I think, yeah.
And on that note,
Re-election.
Yes. So, as I mentioned in our talk, we do have an important election that's coming up here in the Woodlands area regarding incorporation. So, have you guys voted yet? Have y'all taken the time to vote, early vote? Are y'all going to wait until November 2nd?
Unfortunately, I'm a procrastinator, so there's that.
November 2nd. Okay. But I want to encourage everyone here and then our podcast listeners to go out and vote. Right now is early voting. It's happening now. It ends October 29th for us. So check your polling locations. You can even go to our website and check those locations and times. But once again, November 2nd is the actual election day. We hope that you go out and cast your vote, whatever way it goes. We just encourage, because like I mentioned before, everything starts locally. So I encourage you to do your research, have an understanding, bring your sample ballot into the polling site with you, and go off of that. So I just once again encourage everyone. And I think this year it's different, actually. They have new machines.
Fancy.
oh, nice.
They have
Younger
new
machines
machines.
Wow.
Yes, and they actually have the candidates listed, but do not have the parties. So
Oh,
I love
I
it.
love that.
I love
Yeah.
that.
Interesting.
I've
Yeah.
always said that I liked that.
yeah, so it's going to be interesting this time around to
Yeah.
see how that's going to play out for us. But yeah, November 2nd, go out and vote, guys.
Any last minute comments from anybody? David, you want to talk about your nursing home? I'm just like, we want to thank you all for joining us on our special political edition of this episode. And don't forget to listen every other Thursday. What am I doing every other Thursday?
Every other Thursday.
Every other Thursday for a new episode. And we'll have some new great ideas and talking points and amazing guests. And you'll see these two back again later. And thank you guys.
Yeah,
Thank
Margo.
you.
Thanks for being with
Thank
us.
you
Yeah,
guys
it's
for
great.
having us. Yes.
Bye.
Bye.